Hey, what's up guys, Sir Emanon here, and welcome to another episode of Road to 1000 DuelingBook Rating. So this is going to be for a brand new week in the series, meaning that we're going to be taking a look at a new deck, and that deck is actually going to be Phantom Knights, as you guys voted for in the poll. And as you guys probably saw by the title, we're actually going to be playing a mirror match, which is quite unexpected, but should be fairly fascinating nonetheless. And I do want to give a shout out to Don Bongo, who is my opponent here. He happens to be a viewer of the channel, so if you're watching this, big shouts to you, of course. Thanks for making the match a fun one. I do enjoy running into you guys on DuelingBook Ladder just because it makes the environment a little bit more friendly, a little bit more relaxed than it might normally be, because obviously DB Ladder can be a little bit stressful or toxic at times, so it's always nice having that. But also, you guys might notice that my audio is a little bit different, and that's because my friend John actually gifted me a brand new mic for Christmas, and I totally did not expect that. It came in the mail today. And if you are watching this, John, which I kind of doubt you are, but in the event that you are, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, actually. So hopefully that should fix up some of the audio noises that were kind of coming up about a month or so ago. So if you guys have any feedback on the audio, definitely let me know if it's like too loud or too quiet, or if it doesn't sound that good. I would definitely take that into consideration. But we're going to go ahead and without further ado, take a look at the deck list before we get started. And this is largely inspired by Joshua Ooster's top 8 list. I'll leave a link to his channel actually in the description box down below if you guys want to check it out. He has a lot of good content on PK specifically, and that's where it kind of derived a lot of his theorying and combos, and of course the build from. I made a couple of changes. Notably, I'm testing out the Psychics in exchange for the Dangers. Not that I think the Dangers are bad, it's just that I like cards that are kind of guaranteed plays, whereas obviously the Dangers are guaranteed extenders, but I don't like the risk of maybe pitching non-engine cards. Obviously, you can pitch like the PKs themselves, but I like having that middle ground as opposed to like high ceiling, high reward, or high risk, high reward. But also, he said in his list, or he said in his profile, that he was probably going to take out the Magical Eyes Fusion. So I put in a second copy of Ragged Gloves. And then I also added in Wing instead of Reborn, just because I like having it as a part of the engine to supplement the second copy of Gloves. This card helps play around Nibiru, which is why I'm putting it in at 2 here. If you open like a way to get into Cherubini via Tour Guide, you can actually use this to play around Nibiru, and that is pretty good. But yeah, extra inside, I also have some minor changes, notably taking out like the second Dragoon package for more flexible spots. Here I put an Almirage just in case you really brick on just one PK name. And then I also on Phoenix, I do believe is the other change. And then the side deck is I put in Ghost Spells as well as Pankratops in exchange for, I believe it was DD Crow, and then some other card that I can't remember off the top of my head, but I want to just have an additional hand trap on the side here. But these are, of course, just changes that I'm testing, not by any means a finalized build. It's always going to be evolving. So if you guys have any suggestions, definitely be sure to let me know if you are more well-versed in this deck than I am, because I'm not actually very experienced with this particular deck, but it's always one that I've wanted to look at, so that's why I kind of had it as an option, of course. But that's going to be it. I'm not going to spend too much time delving into detail there. We're going to go ahead and just jump into the replay now without any further ado. So like I mentioned, this is a PK mirror, so it's going to be pretty interesting and a little bit awkward to navigate, but not too bad, because the interactions aren't going to change a whole lot based on the virtue of this being a mirror specifically. You just have to navigate the way you usually would, based on like resources in the board state, of course. But our opening hand, we're going second, is Kagemusha Knight, Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloak, Torrent Scales, Ash, and a Psychic Wielder. So this hand is pretty decent, has a hand trap, but not a, this is the only hand trap I'm playing since its versatility. Testing out kind of just his list, of course, Joshua's, that is. But yeah, this is like a fairly strong hand, like it's reasonable as far as the engine is concerned. And you might have to excuse me if I make misplays, because I am not very good at this deck. This is not one that I've, again, played very often. But he's going to start out with a Torrent Scales of his own, followed by his own Kagemusha Knights, so hand looking pretty similar. And he's going to go ahead and follow it up by summoning a copy of Silent Boots. Then he's going to use the Torrent Scale and pitching the Cloak. Here I'm like, well, there's not really a big point in ashing, because the only real name to send left is Gloves, which is fine. It gets another extender, but like this isn't really going to stop him that much. I'd rather stop Rusty at that point, because even though stopping Rusty won't hinder his play that badly, it will at least, stop like an additional card being accessed, because Rusty is functionally a +2. But yeah, he's slinking away into a copy of Masquerena, and here I'm thinking, all right, so he's probably not playing like the BA cards, because I just assumed he wasn't on Cherubini at this point. So I'm like, all right, that's one thing to note about his build. Maybe it's just more of a PK focused lineup, because the BAs can definitely be bricks, which is understandable. But yeah, he's gonna go ahead and link off into Rusty, and I decided to use my Ash here because it's like, when else am I really gonna use it? I figured that getting or stopping access to like another potential name, even though he already has all 4 in circulation, but more importantly, just like an additional trap, I thought would be decent. If nothing else, like this curtails the follow up a little bit, not by much, but every little bit helps. I mean, again, like his hand was strong enough to where the Ash really didn't matter, but might as well just try and stop the bleeding a little bit. Like, I would have been more tempted to stop the Torrent scale if he didn't already special the boots and pitch the cloak for cost. So it's like, what can you do at that point, right? So Ragged Gloves is going to go ahead and send the wing, and then he's going to trigger the Torrent scale on resolution off of that, and then follow that up with a wing in Graveyard to bring back the copy of Ancient Cloak. And here he goes for the Break Sword to pop itself, or not pop itself, but rather have the Rusty pop it, and then using its effect to bring it back to the Phantom Knights. And from this position, I thought he was maybe going to go like Verite Anaconda, just because like that's pretty standard. But he actually surprises me and goes for the Redoer. And being, all right, well, as long as he doesn't hit a trap off the top, I'm actually pretty okay with this. Because now I only really have to deal with the Fog Blade that I know of at least. But yeah, he's going to pass, and then I draw a copy of Dark Magician, which is actually pretty bad. Obviously, it's not very good, but it'll be more apparent as to why it was specifically not a good draw later on. But yeah, Standby Phase Redo hits my Droplet, and I'm just thankful it's not a trap at this point. Would have been obviously great if it was a monster, but can't really ask for much more than just not hitting a trap, really. So yeah, and we're gonna go ahead and proceed to the main phase, and then we're gonna start off very similarly to our opponent. We're gonna normal summon a copy of Torrent Scale and then go for Kagamucha Knight, and then use the Torrent Scale pitching the Cloak for cost, and then sending a copy of Ragged Gloves. We are 1 PK behind where our opponent was because we opened Wielder instead of Boots, but still we have a fair amount of bodies on the board. Here we're gonna special summon the Wielder because it's free. And then we're going to make a copy of Cherubini because we are in the BA stuff, as you saw. So, yeah, I wanted to get to the Torrent Scale back in Graveyard so I could bring it back and then use it as an additional body later on. And, of course, Wielder is not a dark, so it doesn't help make Rusty. But, yeah, going to use the Cherubini. I'm just trying to see how far I can get before like my opponent uses the Fog Blade, because I know it's Fog Blade and then 1 potential hand trap, and that's really all I have to worry about. I do have to be a little bit careful and mindful that when this Fog Blade goes to Graveyard, it can bring back this Break Sword, which will represent an additional pop when it gets summoned to Rusty Zone. So that's something I have to be careful of as well, is that it's really 2 interruptions if I don't play this out correctly. So I send the Graph off the Cherubini here, and then use Graph to summon out Seer. And then I go for the Ancient Cloak right now because I'm trying to get a little bit more value before I try and actually crack the board. And this kind of is trying to ensure just that I have a bit more follow-up. So I go ahead, banish the Cloak, search Boots, and then I use the Torrent Scales to bring itself back. This is because at this point you can use the Levier. Since Seer getting back Cherubini versus Graph doesn't matter a ton except for potentially the link rating. And I guess going second it matters more because this can help ladder up into Access Code or Unicorn easier. But I really just wanted to make sure I'd have follow-up in case that I wouldn't be able to win the game this turn. Because keep in mind, this Rusty was actually made with IP, so I can't pop it with anything like my own Rusty or like Dragoon or Access Code. So it's actually kind of unlikely that I'm going to be able to win the game, especially if this Fog Blade goes back to Grave. So that's something I have to definitely just keep track of. Here I go for Levier, like I mentioned, and then this is actually the first misplay that I can definitely immediately identify. You guys can point out more misplays if you see them, which I'm certain there are going to be more. But what I should have done was actually not overlay this Torrent Scale. I should have overlaid the Kagamucha Knight, because what is going to happen here is that I want to detach this Seer so I can bring back the graph for more material. But the problem is that this torrent scale is stuck underneath, which hinders potential plays with Breaksword later on. Just the way that I sequence it. So I bring back the Ancient Cloak off the Levier, and then Seer triggers to bring back graph. Obviously, they're not destroyed because of Cherubini's effect, just in case you guys are wondering. But yeah, I'm going to use the graph and the Cherubini for the Rusty. And then on summon, he's going to immediately use the Fog Blade. And I'm like, all right, that's cool that I didn't actually have to use the Fog Blade, or sorry, the Rusty effect yet to prompt it. So now I'm kind of just trying to see what I can do from this position to out the board and preventing as much floating as possible. And here's where I realized if the Hcabe Merchandite and the Torrent Scale were switched, I could go for a Breaksword and then like maybe force redo a little bit earlier. But more importantly, just get the Breaksword engraved so that I can reborn it later if I need to. And here's also where it's awkward because like I want to special this Boots and then go for like Unicorn to spin this back, but then I have to pitch Dark Magician and then I can't go for a Dragoon. And that ends up being not very good, of course. So I have to kind of work around this because here, right around here is where I realized that I misplayed. So I try to recover a little bit. I go for the Ragged Gloves next, but that actually gets ashed. And I'm not actually too upset about this because all this really was trying to do was see if I could get maybe a follow-up for later turns again, since I already messed up. But it wasn't really going to contribute a whole ton to this particular turn, apart from just being extra potential material for like maybe a Verte. And that I guess couldn't matter because I had to later on burn Shade Brigandine for it, as you're about to see. But yeah, here's where I'm like, oh yeah, I totally just misplayed because I should have just made the material be the Hcabe Knight instead of the Torrent Scale. But yeah, so here I'm just forced to make Unicorn without going into Breaksword at all. And then I shuffle back the Fog Blade, because again, I don't want that to float. Since I'm fairly confident that I can clear the Rusty. So I don't want like this to be coming back during the end phase off of like the Fog Blade. Because again, I'm fairly certain that I'm not able to OTK this turn. So I just want to cut my losses and do the best I can at assembling a board at least. And here's what I'm talking about, where now that I can use the Rusty due to the Fog Blade being used preemptively, I'm able to kind of recover a little bit, but I have to use a Shade Brigandine to get extra material since both the Ragged Gloves did get Ash and also, again, I misplayed. So yeah, this is not the cleanest way to do this, but it still does make Rarity Anaconda, which is decent at least. And like here's another problem where obviously the DM has to go to the graveyard. He's going to use the Redoer to draw him a card. And I go ahead and just make the Dragoon anyways. And I haven't luckily used this Silent Boots yet, so I can still at least have a negation for this Dragoon by keeping a trap in hand. So I'm going to beat over the Rusty. Oh, another misplay that I did, by the way, was I had a Cloak on the board at one point, and I should have just made this Rusty 29. And that definitely is something that you should just be doing, but I forgot to do it. But yeah, that's going to be Dragoon attacking. Obviously, you can't use this effect. Well, I could, but this is protected via IP, so not much to be done there. I think I attack for 26, which should be 26 plus 8 because of the Cloak, but you know, these are things that I need to kind of pick up as I play the game more with this deck. This is actually the first game I've ever played with this deck with the release of Torrent Scales. So I pretty much don't know what I'm doing at all. I'm kind of just trying to navigate as best as I possibly can. But yeah, Boots for me is going to search a Wings. I value the Dragoon negate more highly than Fog Blade because this pitching the Wing allows me to kind of recover a bit. It'd be better if I had the Breaksword, like I mentioned earlier, which I would have been able to do more profitably if I didn't mess up. That way I could have 2 interruptions here instead of just 1. So I'm not feeling that safe, but I have to kind of just live with my choices. Redo came back. It technically should be in a defense position, but you can just switch to attack on his turn. Not really going to make a big difference there. He's going to normal summon a copy of Ancient Cloak, and I'm like, all right, that's fine, because he already had a Cloak in Graveyard. He's going to link away for Almirage, and then go for Cloak to add a copy of Staingreaves, which is one of the ones that I'm not playing at the moment. Something else that I've also been considering testing as just like a one-off maybe. But yeah, here I asked to read the Staingreaves just to make sure, because he's triggering Torrent Scale off of the Ancient Cloak being banished, And now I'm just wondering if it's worth negating here, because I'm trying to think of the outs to Dragoon. Right now, I don't want to negate anything that isn't going to directly threaten Dragoon, but I realize that, okay, if I let this go and Torrent Scale hits the board, Sangrius hits the board, he can go like Unicorn Access Code boost, and then beat over Dragoon. So I'm like, all right, I think I have to negate the Torrent Scale, because not only that, this will allow him to like potentially send a Boots and then just get more value, or send a Trap to bring back Rusty and get even more value. So I'm like, yeah, I really do not want this Torrent Scale to hit the board. So I go ahead and just stop that right there and just hope that the last card in his hand isn't anything. And here goes the battle phase, and if this was boosted to 2900 off of this Ancient Cloak, then that would have mattered, because it's until the end of your opponent's turn. So yeah, you can see that that's why you kind of want to do that. It's just free. But he's just going to set one and then pass, and here I'm feeling a lot better now, because I can go ahead and banish the Wing during the end phase to bring back Rusty, and then bring back the Torrent Scale via its own effect. And here I'm going to draw a Tracker for turn. It doesn't matter what I draw, because I want to keep it for Dragoon negate. And then during the standby phase, he picks up a copy of Cosmic. Oh, yeah, this is something also. My opponent, I think, forgot to use Redoer during his own standby phase, which could have potentially mattered. I would have picked up it would have picked up my Tracker, and then it would have drawn Cosmic for turn, which actually would have been better for me, but he might have picked up a Trap. I don't know what card on the top of my deck is, but yeah, that could have changed the course of this game, perhaps. But this actually would have been just nice to save myself the trouble of potentially what I assume is Fog Blade, and that's what it is. Because PK is not setting too much back row apart from Fog Blade and maybe like Forbidden Droplet. But here I decide I'm going to go ahead and use the Rusty. He's going to chain Fog Blade. I don't negate this with Dragoon because I am trying to assemble game through the Fog Blade Graveyard effect. So I decided that's fine. Like, I have a lot of resources anyways, so I just want to let this go. And plus, like, he could draw something nasty off of the Redoer. Like maybe a Nibiru, who knows. So I don't really want to chance it. Here I go for the Cloak to search for a copy of Boots. And then special summon the Boots here. And we go for the Break Sword. And then I use Break Sword to pop itself in the Fog Blade. And then I use Break Sword to bring back the materials. Here, yeah, I kind of like sequence this a little bit awkwardly, because it's around this point where I remember that Almirage actually has an effect which will protect the Redoer from either Access Code or Dragoon. So I'm like, I probably should have done that before all of this, because that would have made a possible difference there. But yeah, on summon, my opponent decides to use Redoer. And then here I'm going to use the Dragoon. My opponent will use the Almirage to kind of just stop it there. Targeting the Redoer, of course. And then here we're locked in a darks because we're under Break Sword. So I was like, I wanted to go for Appaloosa, but I couldn't. So the next best option was just to go for Masquerade, so I could do it on my opponent's turn. And then here I go for the Silent Boots to search a copy of Fog Blade. And I'm like, all right, maybe I could actually, if I can't go for game this turn, I might as well set up. But I think I actually can go for game if this goes well. So I go ahead and use the Ragged Gloves, and then I send a copy of Fog Blade. And then I go into the battle phase. So this Dragoon's only on 3k, that's important to note, because I negated the Torrent Scale last turn, but that's a Graveyard effect, so it didn't actually destroy the Torrent Scale. And this has to destroy in order to gain attack. So I just make sure that my opponent takes the correct amount of damage. So yeah, that's only 600, and then this is 5. This is 8 from the IP. And then the Rusty is 21. And then here we go for Fog Blade to bring back the Break Sword. And then here my opponent uses his own Fog Blade to bring back his own Break Sword. I go ahead and negate that with Dragoon. And then he triggers the Torrent Scale off that. And then I realize, wait, I actually probably shouldn't have negated that because my opponent has only 500 life, so I could just bury my opponent. And my opponent, luckily for me, summons back the Torrent Scale. And then I can just go into main phase 2 and then use Dragoon, because I only used it once this turn. If my opponent didn't bring back the Torrent Scale, the Break Sword would just attack for game. So yeah, I tell my opponent, or ask my opponent if it's okay to leave the battle phase, and they realizes that I'm just going to burn with Dragoon, and that's just going to be the end of game 1. So yeah, that is a kind of an awkward game 1. Definitely had a couple of blunders on my own end. I was just more focused on what I was trying to do with my own resource management. Just because, again, I am not like the most well versed in this deck, but I want to play it more and get a bit more familiarized with it. So this is something that I'm going to be continuing to work on and trying to just do my best here. But here's going to be the siding plan going into game number 2 here. And it's a little bit weird as well because like I kind of want to keep in the Cosmics because of the Fog Blades, but I also want to keep in Droplet in case of Dragoon. So I figured that Dragoon was a bit more imposing, so that's why I chose Droplet over the Cosmic. I could have kept in Cosmic over maybe putting in Bell. That could have been an option as well. But here I just wanted to just stop my opponent's plays on his first turn rather than wait till my own turn. Which is why I did it this way, because like Cosmicing the Fog Blades is fine, but my opponent would already get value off of like the PK engine. Whereas the other hand traps that I'm putting in here would kind of help out more in that department. But again, everything's kind of work in progress. So this is day 1 of testing. It's not going to be perfect. So we're just going to go ahead and move into game 2 here. If you are enjoying this commentary, definitely be sure to leave a like in the video and then subscribe if you are new here and want to see more videos in this series or commentary similar to this one. So we're going to be going second again, and our hand is Red Eyes Fusion, Nibiru, Seer, Tour Guide, and Fog Blade. So this is not a great hand apart from the Nibiru. We drew the Seer, which is just kind of a Garnet. That's one of the things with the BAs is that they add additional bricks when you're already playing the Dragoon package. But I still think that having Cherubini, like you need a lot of ways to kind of kickstart your engine, I feel. And Cherubini is one of the best ways to do that. And again, like you have safety around Nibiru if you kind of play it well. Or like manage your resources and if you open up the right cards. But my opponent's going to start with a Rhoda. That's going to search for a copy of Torrent Scale, which he will then normal summon and then go for a copy of Silent Boots. He's going to use the Torrent Scale to pitch Takatomborg. This is another thing that I was kind of considering was the Speedroids. But that's going to send Ancient Cloak. And then here he surprises me by going into Cherubini, because I just kind of assumed that from game 1 he wasn't on Cherubini. But here he is, and I'm like, oh, is this actually on the BA package? But he's actually just using it to send the last name to the graveyard. So yeah, he's definitely not on any BAs here. But Gloves is going to go ahead, send a copy of Wings, and then he's going to trigger the Torrent Scale off of that, and then go for a Cloak to search for a copy of Staingreaves, because he wants to Wings back at the Boots, and then summon the Staingreaves off of that. And here I'm like, well, there's not really a better time to Nibiru than here, because this will get banished from Wings, this will get banished from its own effect. So yeah, might as well just drop it before Rusty ever hits the board. And this is a pretty decent spot. The stats are, I believe, 2500, 3400. So I put it in attack position and then pass. And then here I'm like, all right, my hand kind of isn't great either way, but the game state is so simplified that I feel if I stick a Dragoon, it'll be hard to push past Dragoon, Fog Blade, Droplet. So I'm like, either one of these plays is going to lose to Ash. So let's just see what happens. Troyer will be better follow-up later if this does get Ashed. So I just want to do it now and see what happens. It does get Ashed, which I did anticipate for sure. So not a big deal. We're just going to go ahead and attack over the token and then set our 2 back row and then pass. And then my opponent is going to just set another back row and pass. So we're in a pretty good spot. Here I'm thinking it's a Fog Blade, but as soon as Tour Guide resolves successfully, I'm like, all right, so the hand is not Ash. It's not Fog Blade set. So I'm just trying to like assemble the game as fast as I can. What I probably should have been trying to do was just go and play around Nibiru. So you saw I went Tour Guide, Graph, and then summoned out Libic, which is good because obviously Seer is stuck in hand. And then here I use the Cherubini. I send the Gloves to like play around Nibiru a bit, but then later on I just kind of don't respect Nibiru. And you'll see what I mean. So I go for the Rusty, and then I use the Libic to summon Seer, and I use that effect to bring back the Cherubini. And then it's here where I'm like, well, I ultimately just ended up not playing around Nibiru anyway, just the way that I played this out. So I probably should have done was go Cherubini plus Nibiru plus Libic into Appaloosa. And then I could have sent something different entirely off of the Ragged Gloves. Off of the Cherubini instead of the Ragged Gloves. But I would have had Appaloosa plus Cherubini revived off the Seer. And then I could have maybe gone for like sending a Boots even to search for a copy of Shea Brigandine, and I could have gotten Rusty from there. So that would have just been like completely safe as fast as possible. Like that would have been just pretty ideal. But here I'm like, well, I guess I just kind of committed into Nibiru for no reason. Again, this is one of the things where it's like the finer nuances of the deck is something that I need to definitely work on a bit. But yeah, Ragged Glove is going to go and send the Torrent Scale. This is like really, really scuffed since I have a Torrent Scale in my hand. So it's a little bit awkward the way I did this, but I went Cloak to go ahead and search for a Boots, which triggers a Torrent Scale. So in the end, like sending the gloves was okay because it turned into whatever I want to send off the Cherry Beanie regardless. But I just did it in a way where it's like here if I get Nibiru'd, right, I'm just like sad. Or like after this Boot summon, if I get Nibiru'd, I'm really sad. So yeah, that's like that wasn't a very, very elegant way to play this turn out. Could have been a lot different. But luckily my opponent doesn't have it. I go ahead and go for a Rusty to pop. Just want to see what that is. It's a Shea Brigandine, which ended up not really doing anything. And then this is enough for a game on board, so I decide that I'm just going to go ahead and attack for game. And the card in my opponent's hand is a Dark Magician. So yeah, we could have definitely gotten punished there if my opponent had the Nibiru, because I played this out really, really poorly, I think. I probably should have just taken the safe route. Because I mean, if your opponent bricks, it's either like on one of these types of cards or it's on a hand trap. And if it is a hand trap, then you know you don't want to get punished by that. So probably should have just done the Appaloosa route. But in any case, we were able to navigate our way out of that game. The beer put it in the work for sure. But yeah, this is kind of just the preliminary showcase of Phantom Knights. Again, this is not a deck that I'm super well versed in, but this is one that we're going to be working on for the next couple of episodes in this series here. So I hope you guys are going to stick around, and we might try and run into other matchups besides the mirror. It was kind of a awkward to run into the mirror for the first one. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like as well as any thoughts or feedback in the comments. Subscribe for more informative and competitive video content. If you want to, you can follow me on all social media platforms or support me via Patreon at Hcabe Player. All the links in the description as usual. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. See you guys.